Hello and welcome to LNP's The Huddle. I'm Tim Gross. That's John Walk and Kevin Freeman, who's making his LNP Huddle debut. Guys, it's the first weekend of fall. Might not feel like it quite yet weather-wise. It's also the first week of section games in LL football. We're going to talk about our game of the week, E-Town at Cocalico, and Columbia at Donegal. Let's start with E-Town Cocalico, our game of the week. The Bears, of course, one of the big stories from the first 3 weeks of the season. They're 3-0. Their defense has been stellar. Cocalico 1-2, but those two losses might be a little deceiving because they, were really close losses. Lost them right at the end. So how do you think this one's going to play out?
Yeah, and they were close losses to two really good teams. So that's why this is a really sneaky game for, I think, all of us in general. E-Town, as you said, 3-0, but it's against three teams that I think are combined 1-8 so far this year. So I think for E-Town, this is really their first prove-it game of the year. Yeah, they've beaten teams they're supposed to beat. This is the first, I don't know, maybe their toughest challenge to date. And so far, E-Town, well, I guess kind of going back to last year's matchup, I was at that game. I'll be at the game this Friday. If you remember that, Cocalico won in a blowout, I think 49-7. Perhaps E-Town will be motivated by that, or maybe that gives Cocalico the slight edge and being that, hey, we beat them pretty easy last year, maybe we can do it again this year. So as you can see, I'm kind of really wavering on this. I think they're really evenly matched teams, but since I have to pick a winner, I'm going to go with Cocalico, but I'm not feeling real good about that. Good about it, I should say. How about you, Kevin?
Well, I think a lot of the things you said about E-Town are correct. I think Bill McDonald's done a great job to win their first 3 games after losing 8 last year is pretty good. But the one stat that I had, you had too, is their opponents are 1-8 this year, and I think that's a little bit telling. Although, their quarterback, Mika Garber, very good completion percentage, 700 completion percentage, 6 TD passes, that's very good. Plus, he's thrown to a lot of receivers. I think 7 have 3 or more catches, led by Logan Jans hauling in 12 catches, so that's very good. But I think Cocalico, I think, has just been tested a little more, so I'm going to go with them. Their opponents are 6-4. Sometimes in high school football, that doesn't mean anything, but I think it does a little bit here. They've just been tested. Like Tim said, the losses were close. They've been getting it done on the ground, and that's kind of their modus operandi. They always run the ball very, very well, so I think it's going to be Cocalico.
I agree with you guys. I think Cocalico, for years we've seen this where their offense has just taken whatever the defense has given them, and they found a way to tailor their veer offense to kind of combat that. And they have a couple different backs who have gotten it done so far this season. So I think it's a test for E-Town's defense that's really strong, and Cocalico's offense, is known to make the adjustments and kind of throw a couple different looks at teams to kind of mix things up. And I think their line's really experienced too, so I think that's a huge advantage in Cocalico's favor. It's going to be a little closer than 49-7, I think, but I think Cocalico pulls this one out. Finally, we're going to be talking about Columbia Donegal, two teams looking for their first wins of the season. Columbia is kind of at a weird scheduling thing so far this year. Their first game was postponed because it was supposed to be in Wildwood, New Jersey. It got postponed because of the hurricane. Last week, of course, there was a safety scare, so they had to push it back into Saturday afternoon. How do you think they're going to adjust to that, and what's it going to look like against Donegal?
Not only that, we also learned last week Columbia dressed just 19 players. They were without 3 starters. I think that's a big telling key for me personally anyway, because 19 guys, that doesn't even give you a full 22 just a practice with for the upcoming week. That's going to play a huge factor. And as you said, they're both winless. You look at Donegal and it's like, well, what are you making them? Well, they haven't scored a point this season, and Columbia defense is giving up more than 300 yards a game. So you got to think, okay, maybe some things change offensively for Donegal this week. But stated earlier, Columbia is without a few guys. But if you kind of go back to last week's loss, 36-14 at York Suburban on a Saturday, nonetheless, weird game for them. But Columbia in the second quarter, they came down the red zone 3 times. They were unable to score. You got to think if they were able to punch it in all 3 times, it probably would have been a different game. Maybe probably the same outcome, but maybe a little bit closer. So perhaps that gives Columbia the slight edge if they can kind of clean up some turnovers there. But again, have to pick a game here. Donegal is traditionally the more, experienced team. Jeff Politis kind of knows what to do there. Columbia, until we see otherwise, I'm going to go with the Indians this week.
All right, I think I wrote the Columbia feature for the tab this year, and Anthony Sadasante, who's the coach, emailed me with some stats from last year to get ready for the tab. And he wrote at the bottom, he said, no way we finished last in Section 3. So now he's got a chance to take the first step to try to prove that. We'll see if he can do it. You know, they do have a couple of losses, but in the first game that they played against Donegal Catholic, they rushed for 238 yards. And against York Suburban, they threw for 177 yards. So they've proven that they can do both things. And that's Malik Crenshaw as a quarterback there. So we can do those things. So they have that capability, but the shortage of manpower might hurt, and that's a little bit troubling. Donegal, they're just not, they haven't put it together. You know, that's the thing about them. 2.9 yards per rush, that's not going to get it done. No points. And they're giving up a ton of yards a game, over 400 yards a game. So I'm going to go with Columbia in this game. It's the backyard rivalry. They've been going at it for a long time, those two, but I think I like the Tide in this one.
I'm going to go with Kevin and pick Columbia. I think the numbers thing is a little concerning, but in another way, you know, if those 19 guys are really, you know, getting something going, maybe you want them out on the field as much as possible. So Donegal, like Kevin said, they're really struggling to get it together. They haven't scored any points yet. I think that might be broken on Friday. But I think Columbia, you know, they've strung together some drives. They just haven't been able to really finish. Against a Donegal team that's kind of struggling right now, it might be a little better for them to get on the board here and see if they can hold something together. I'm going to take Columbia. So watch this Huddle's pregame picks every Thursday afternoon, and be sure to check out LancasterOnline.com for Friday night for all the final L League scores and results. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.